My name is John Miller, and my life has been pretty typical for a guy in my position. I worked hard to climb the legal career ladder, always aiming for the respect and recognition of my colleagues and superiors. I married Susan, not out of love, but because it seemed like a sensible social choice. At first, our marriage was satisfactory, but I soon realized that my wife was difficult to live with, and our relationship became more of a formality. We spent most of our time apart, and when we were together, it felt more out of convenience than affection. We had children, and I did what I could to ensure they got a good education. I thought I was doing the right thing, following the path society expected of me. However, I began to feel an emptiness in my life, a sense that something was missing, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. Everything changed one day when I felt a strange pain on the left side of my body while adjusting a curtain. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just a passing ache. But the pain persisted and started to get worse. I went to several doctors and they ran numerous tests, but they couldn't identify the exact cause. The pain became a constant presence in my life, affecting my ability to work and enjoy the things I once took pleasure in. As time went on, the pain intensified and my health began to deteriorate rapidly. I realized that the illness was serious and possibly fatal. From that moment, my life changed completely. What once seemed important, like my job and reputation, lost its meaning. I started questioning whether I had lived my life the right way. I spent long hours reflecting on my choices and realized I had lived superficially, always worried about appearances and what others thought of me. My work, which once was a source of pride, now seemed empty and purposeless. My relationship with my wife and children was distant and cold, and I realized I had never built deep connections with anyone. As my health worsened, I felt increasingly isolated and desperate. The physical pain was unbearable, but the worst part was the fear of death and the uncertainty of what came next. I was terrified of dying because I didn't know what awaited me. Was there something beyond death? And if there was, what would it be like? These questions haunted me. In my darkest moments, I started questioning everything I had believed in and valued throughout my life. I realized that my pursuit of success and others' approval had not brought me happiness or peace. I felt lost, as if I had wasted my life chasing things that didn't really matter. I remember one night when the pain was particularly intense, I began to scream in despair. Susan, my wife, came into the room, but instead of comforting me, she seemed annoyed by the disturbance I was causing. That moment crystallized the futility of my existence for me. The only person who seemed genuinely concerned about me was Tom, our young servant, who cared for me with patience and compassion. Tom was a source of comfort in my final days. He didn't have the pretensions or concerns I had. He simply did what was needed to ease my suffering. His attitude made me think that maybe there was a simpler, truer way to live, one I had never considered. In my final days, the pain became a constant part of me, like a shadow that never went away. Every movement was torment, and even breathing felt like an effort. I spent most of my time lying down, unable to engage in the activities that I once deemed essential to my life. Doctor visits became routine, but their words no longer provided comfort. They spoke in technical terms, but nothing seemed to improve my condition. I felt like a patient in an experiment with no control over my own body. Susan continued to stay by my side, but our relationship had become even more strained. She seemed impatient, as if my illness was an inconvenience to her organized and meticulous life. Her care was cold and mechanical, and I realized she was more concerned with appearances than with my well-being. It was a constant reminder of how our lives had been shaped by social conventions rather than true feelings. The only person who brought me any relief was Tom, our young servant. He was different from the others. His simplicity and sincerity touched me in a way I hadn't expected. Tom helped with my basic needs without complaint, and there was something comforting about his presence. He didn't try to cheer me up with empty words or promises of recovery. He was just there, doing what he could to ease my pain. On a particularly tough night, when the pain seemed unbearable, I started screaming and moaning in agony. Susan entered the room, but her look was one of irritation, not compassion. She asked me to try to control myself, worried that my screams would wake the neighbors or disturb the kids. It was at that moment that something inside me broke. I realized I was completely alone in my suffering, surrounded by people who neither understood nor truly cared about me. From that point on, I began to accept the reality of my situation. I understood that I was dying and nothing could change that. Instead of fighting against the inevitability of death, I started reflecting on what it meant for me. The idea that my entire life might have been lived the wrong way terrified me. What if I had valued the wrong things? What if all my efforts to achieve success and recognition had been in vain? In my moments of greatest despair, a sense of clarity began to emerge. I remembered Tom's words, who once said that everyone must die and that the only thing that matters is living honestly. Those words, simple as they were, resonated deeply with me. I realized that my life had been a constant pursuit of approval and status rather than truth and authenticity. I began to wonder if there was still time to change, to find some meaning or redemption. However, my body was failing quickly, and I knew the end was near. The idea of dying still scared me, but I started to see death not as an enemy, but as a natural part of life. Accepting this reality brought a sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. In my final moments, an unexpected peace came over me. I felt ready to leave behind the pain and suffering. I didn't know what awaited me on the other side, but the thought of continuing to live in such a debilitated body seemed more frightening than death itself. As I closed my eyes for the last time, there was no more fear or resistance, only a quiet acceptance of what was to come. And then I died, the pain disappeared, and all that remained was a sense of release. My life, with all its ups and downs, had come to an end. There were no more worries about what others thought, no more regrets about what could have been. There was only a calm, a peace I had never known. And so, I said goodbye to the world, leaving behind what could no longer touch me.